Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could change the football landscape in the very near future. Now, if this is not your first episode of this podcast, there's every chance in the world that you know what we talked about last episode, which was the fact that Bill O'Brien left Alabama. He's leaving a void in the offensive coordinator's position, so I've got a short list here of guys that I believe that could take that position, as well as receivers that have transferred onto new destinations, new horizons, however you want to say it. And I'm going to be grading those receivers on the fit and, what they bring to the table and what the team brings to the table. So make sure to stick around for that. But before we get into either one of our topics, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I'm just trying to grow the channel. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with my short list with Alabama because, like I said, I led off with it last episode. I mentioned that I might be putting something like this together, so it makes sense to go to that point first, right? That's where we're going to begin this episode. And, the obvious, most sensible one, I guess, would be to stay in-house. That seems to be potentially the way the Bama is going to move towards, and there's certainly a name that sits there at the front of the table. It's the guy I've seen talked about the most internally for this job, so we go ahead and just assume that he is the front-running candidate within the school, and that, of course, is Holman Wiggins. Holman Wiggins, if you don't know who that is, he is the wide receivers coach and now assistant head coach at Alabama. Am I claiming this hire doesn't have merit or that it's creative? No, I think it's the most sensible choice, the most realistic choice among this list. It's just not the one that's going to get Bama fans most excited, not the one that I believe most people will click onto videos like this to hear about. Wiggins joined the Alabama coaching staff in 2019 as the wide receivers coach, and he has slowly moved up the ranks. He now sits still as wide receiver coach, but he's also got that assistant head coaching tag next to his name as well, just across 3 years of being there. He also has experience with running backs. He was a running back, and he was a running backs coach for a couple different stops along the way, so it's fairly safe to assume that he kind of understands the entirety of the offense. Maybe you don't want him being the primary guy who locks in on the O-line or the quarterback or the tight ends, but he at least knows how all these pieces come together, and he's seen it firsthand, and he's, played those positions before, so he feels like a safe enough guy to where you're not, just taking a complete gamble, especially because it's not like Coach Saban doesn't already know him. It's an in-house hire. That's what you do in-house hires for, is for stability. So that's really what Holman really does bring to the table. If it's going to be an internal candidate that gets this position, you've got to assume it'll be Holman. Again, he's about the only true guy that I think about, within the staff currently that I believe should potentially make a move up. Whether or not that's where they go, I couldn't tell you. But, as far as just the ones that you almost need to get out of the way because, everybody's going to talk about them, that's what Holman Wiggins is right now. And the next candidate I want to speak on has also been brought up a fair bit. There's been a couple different guys from the NFL get brought up in this specific coaching search, but the one I think makes the most sense is Jason Garrett, formerly the Dallas Cowboys head coach, then became the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants, now does some studio work. It's Fox Sports, I believe. Maybe I might have that wrong, but I know that he's in the studio now. He's not really coaching. He's not on any sidelines. So if there's going to be a job that draws him back, you would assume it would need to be at least an offensive coordinator spot, maybe a head coaching spot. I think going to Bama is probably the best he's going to be able to get. So he's probably my most realistic option. As far as the NFL hires go, former head coach, something we've seen Alabama do before. Speaking of, it really wouldn't be the first time we saw Saban, kind of adopt a former NFL head coach to get them back on track for a second swing of things, would it be? We just saw Bill O'Brien. It didn't quite pan out the exact way that I thought it was, at least, but he is going back to the NFL, at least in the offensive coordinator space in New England, which could potentially serve as the next jumping off point for him. While he's never touched the collegiate level, talking about Jason Garrett here, he does have a tie to Tuscaloosa through Nick Saban, because Nick Saban's the person who gave him his first coaching gig. After Garrett retired from being a quarterback, he was the offensive coordinator, or the quarterback's coach rather, in Miami when Saban had that short little run with the Dolphins. Is it the most inspired option? Hardly. Is it, comfortable? Not really. I don't know that I think Jason Garrett really has a lot of that it factor, a lot of that what you almost kind of need for Bama right now. I can't say with full confidence that Jason Garrett has that. I really can't. But as far as, you see Greg Roman getting thrown around and some other different NFL names, that were, either really established guys or previous head coachings, I don't feel very comfortable with any of them. Miles Garrett, Jason Garrett is the one I would say I feel the most comfortable about of the collective guys that have been mentioned, from a prominent spot in the NFL coming down to college and being a part of what they've got going on in Tuscaloosa. So you notice that I pick my words very carefully with the NFL, rung and the area that is, because there's not just one NFL guy here technically, because the guy who I want to bring up next does still technically coach in the NFL, but I wouldn't qualify him as an NFL coach in a sense, because a lot of what he's done at that standard of football is not his peak. It's rather his peak would be whenever he was the offensive coordinator for the LSU Tigers during that magical year with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, talking about Joe Brady, the current quarterbacks coach of the Buffalo Bills. I think if you're going to get an NFL guy to take this job, rather than it being a former head coach or, Greg Roman, somebody established, I think Joe Brady's probably the most reasonable one to expect, because this would be a huge step up for him, a return to the SEC once more, where he really did earn a lot of his stock and a lot of his success, that success that eventually carried him to Carolina with Matt Rule, where he would eventually, face the axe, go to Buffalo, be their quarterback's coach, and now he's kind of in a state of limbo, which is concerning. So why not potentially consider going back to the SEC and joining up with Nick Saban? I mean, if I was offered that position, and it was between being the quarterback's coach of the Buffalo Bills or being, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, I think it would be a pretty easy choice for me personally. But I'm not Joe Brady. I'm not going to claim that I am Joe Brady, so you never really know what decision he would decide to make here. But overall, we've seen Brady work in the SEC. We've seen what happens. Now, granted, that team was extremely talented, and it's concerning to see his stock drop as far as it has in the NFL, because, he joined Carolina as one of the hottest candidates, to be a head coach in college football, decided to travel with Matt Rule, took that position in Carolina, didn't work out for him. It's very concerning. He's cooled off such a tremendous amount since that 2019 run, so maybe this spot's even too high for him. Maybe this is too bold of a prediction and a projection for him, because Alabama, at the end of the day, is still Alabama. Nick Saban is still Nick Saban, and that program still has such a rare air around it, such a untouchable quality to it, that, a struggling offense coordinator in the NFL who drops down to quarterbacks coach for I wouldn't say one of Josh Allen's worst seasons, but definitely his worst season in the past couple of years, you can be a bit worried. You can be a bit skeptical as to how that really looks and where things should go. But I think that his previous success in college might be just enough for a plus, and to really have coaches put those blinders on and say, you know what, we're sticking with you. We're going to see how it goes. Let's bring you back down here. I think that what he has done in college football really could provide the stepping stool, even 3 or 4 years later, to becoming an offensive coordinator for a major program yet again, even though there hasn't really been much success beyond the point of being LSU's offensive coordinator. And then the last one I want to talk about, I haven't seen him on any lists. I haven't seen him on, any rumors or speculations. This is just kind of a personal guy that I would look at, and it is kind of what I'm labeling my under-the-radar coordinator to consider here. I went ahead and looked at a lot of different stats and metrics, and obviously just kind of going back on what I remembered from college football this year, and something that kind of came across my mind is prior to the Mac, Jalen, Bryce Young, obviously, run that they've had at quarterback, it really, Alabama wasn't much of a quarterback's team. In fact, they had A.J. McCarron, for half a second, and I believe he went in the second or third round. But they were more established in running the ball and having the offensive line to go up against literally anybody in the country's defensive line. That's what they were founded on. So whenever I kind of put that together, I said, okay, who's somebody who has a fresh outlook on how that looks, has success of it recently, could kind of revitalize that and still have it meet the new wave where you can't just completely isolate your quarterback and make him basically just a jugs machine and just handing off the ball. So I came to the conclusion that I think Florida State's offensive coordinator, Alex Atkins, could be the way to go here. So last year, let me walk you through last year and kind of what he looked like with the Seminoles. His offense was 16th in team offensive rankings. That also includes being 13th in rush yards per game, 10th in total offensive yards per game. And then you look at his lineage and kind of how he's moved through college football. He was an assistant head coach at Tulane for a little bit, went to become the offensive coordinator at Charlotte, then got sent to Florida State as the offensive coordinator. That all happened in a 6-year span. That's how quick he climbed the ladder. And, he's been the offensive coordinator for Florida State for, I believe, the last 2 seasons. With how quick this dude moves and with how fast people begin to realize, oh, he might be really talented, I think there's some potential here, at least, to consider taking him in here and just giving him the next jump up that he wants to do, And when you look at kind of his background even further than that, he was a 4-year starter on the UT Martin offensive line, and he's found success each step of the way. I mean, you don't end up from Florida State from the assistant head coach at Tulane in 6 years if you're not doing something right. I think it'll be difficult to pull him out of Tallahassee, seeing as this year is going to be a very pivotal one for Florida State for the Seminoles, because Jordan Travis is getting set up. The rest of the team looks pretty good. This guy strikes me as a potential name to watch on the pure fact of he has moved so quick up the ranks that if Bama does kind of look in his direction and say, you know what, maybe we consider it, I think he'd be a pretty quality hire, especially if you're trying to move more in the direction of dominating ground games, similar to more or less what Georgia has put together as they've built up to the top and really become the stabilizing force, if you will, within the SEC. So those are my primary 4 candidates that I wanted to talk about, some of those guys that you might be seeing the names of. And while, yes, Josh Gaddis could absolutely be on the list, I keep saying his name, but Greg Roman, I've seen Mullins pop up. I've seen some other different guys who have worked with Saban in the past potentially be somebody to consider there, but I would say that those 4 are the ones that I at least wanted to shine a spotlight on and really highlight as guys to know in this process. So now we move on to continuing a trend that I've been doing recently, which is grading transfer portal guys and their fits and how they play relative to how their team plays and how I think their seasons are going to go. Now, there are 3 names I want to mention as to why they will not be in this list, and that's because I've already talked about them in previous videos. So you got Dominic Lovett, who transferred from Missouri. He was one of the top receivers in all of SEC ball. He's gone from Mizzou. You've got Dorian Singer, who left Arizona to be at USC. And then I was going to feature Ra Thomas. I started working on this list last week, and then obviously he got arrested. So don't really know how much of an impact at all he's going to have on the upcoming season. But, that takes out 2 SEC transfers, but there's still 3 more that I wanted to talk about. To be completely honest with you, I could have made this list entirely SEC, and we start off in the SEC because a huge target has left his smaller program and has decided to go to the University of Arkansas. We are, of course, talking about 210-pound Tyrone Broden leaving Bowling Green, Kentucky to be a Hog. And guys, this dude is huge. I think Arkansas probably got a good one out of this. So when you look at it, he's probably going to step into a pretty prominent role. Arkansas's lost just about every pass catcher they've got, and including Jaden Hasselwood, who I really enjoyed, and some of those other guys around the program. And then you have to look at who Broden is as a player, which is pretty inspiring. He averaged over 16 yards per catch, which is a big dude, is huge. He also got 12 touchdowns, only on 74 catches in his entirety of his stay at Bowling Green. It's a B+ grade for me, purely on his ability to succeed. I don't want to focus too much on Arkansas here because I am very concerned about their program, if I'm being completely honest. But it's, you have to look at where his opportunities lie, which I do think that he will have plenty of opportunities, seeing as how many guys left that program. You have to look at what he brings to the table, which KJ Jefferson has a cannon of an arm. He can get it into that high window, and Broden should be able to pull him down with relative ease. And you got to think about how hard it is to guard that kind of guy. So overall, I'm going to give it a B+ grade just because I think that he will have plenty of opportunities, and I think he will shine whenever I don't believe the Hogs will necessarily. Now, there's still plenty of time for that to change. You still get guys in there, some guys that are showing out. Right now, though, not high on the Hogs. So another team that I want to bring up here, we actually have two from the same school leaving, so I'm actually going to put them up on the same graphic now. Kent State is losing two different receivers, and I've decided we are going to focus on Devontae Walker first. He is going to UNC, and, Kent State really got emptied out here. As you can see, there's a lot of production on your screen of guys leaving the program. And, Devontae Walker, of the two, the one I like more. He's got so much explosivity. He picked up 900 receiving yards and 11 scores this year. Really, his first prominent year of production, his freshman year, wasn't really all that. But his sophomore year made a statement. Obviously, he's going to Chapel Hill. That's kind of that's a big one to jump to just off one productive year as a sophomore, especially going from Kent State. But that's where he's going to be. He also had a rushing touchdown, if that tells you what you need to know about Devontae Walker. North Carolina's losing Josh Downs, and that's going to be rough. He was their receiver one without any questions, without any possibility of negotiation. He was the be-all, end-all of that offense outside of Drake May. But Walker projects well in this spot. He's a little bit more of an X-receiver, a true X-receiver than Josh Downs was. I believe Josh Downs is like 5'10", whereas Devontae is 6'3", but he's got good speed. He's got good length. He gives Drake May an early candidate to create wide receiver one production. I'm giving this one an A-. I think that this is going to be a very fruitful, transfer for both parties involved. I think he will be a prominent fixture within this offense. Now we transfer over to his teammate and cohort, formerly now going to Penn State, Dante Cephas. He actually took a step down in production this year. Year prior, he had 1,240 yards and then dropped down to 744. He also had 9 touchdowns the year prior, and he had 3 this year. But, you qualify it as 2 quality years of production, especially when Kent State played 5 less games, or at least Cephas did, in this past season. Helps soften that concern. You realize, you can't really produce that well whenever you drop from 14 games down to 9 games. You get out of that double-digit range. It was such a big change for Kent State, so it makes sense as to why his numbers declined as much as they did. My main concern here is how much production he's realistically going to get, because you think about Penn State, Drew Aller coming into his first full year as their starter. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen likely going to dominate the game plan. And then you have Keandre Lambert-Smith, who comes in immediately with a lot more stability, a lot more chemistry, a lot more familiarity with the program, with the offense. So if they are going to pass, it stands to reason that that KLS is going to be the primary target for Aller. So I'm kind of modest on this one. Consider this hedging my bets, but I'm going to go with a C grade here. I just think wide receiver one production is a little bit too big of a dream. I think that he probably went to the wrong school if he was looking for more opportunities in the passing game as opposed to, a very strong and successful year. But maybe you don't have to have just a ton of production at Penn State to move on to the NFL and do a lot of good things. So maybe this is an NFL move. I'm not here to really decide that for him. I'm just here to give a grade. So again, hedging my bets here, going with a C even, cut and dry. So the last receiver I want to talk about today, leaving the ACC to join the Independents, Caleb Smith, formerly of Virginia Tech, will now be donning the gold helmets because he is going to Notre Dame. I find this one kind of, I don't want to call him underwhelming, because he did kind of impress me this year. At Virginia Tech, he looks solid. This is his first real year of solid production, but what you can't really grade in that is experience, being in the room, being a part of valuable conversations, which I do believe Caleb Smith probably was. So maybe that's what they brought him in for. But as far as like a true playmaker, I don't know if that's what they're getting from Smith. Again, he only had one true solidified year of good production. The 3 prior, very, very much a mixed bag. He doesn't really need to be a star, which is promising, but when you look at Notre Dame and how you would assume that they're going to move with bringing in Sam Hartman, I feel like you needed a bigger splash than this. Caleb Smith, while I do, again, think he's going to be fine, I don't think he's going to be more than like what would normally be a wide receiver 2 on most other teams. It's going to be interesting to see kind of who Hartman gravitates towards, because Smith does absolutely have a leg up in that. The quarterback next year has no allegiances to anybody. It's not like they kept around any of the quarterbacks that we saw this year, Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner. It's not like they are going to be the starters. We know Sam Hartman's going to be the starter, so it's really just who can get to be more comfortable with him first. Now, can Caleb Smith do that? Absolutely. I'm not going to count the kid out, but I don't see on tape what I need to see from him to really feel super duper confident in the fact that he is going to be the guy. I don't think that what they realistically needed at Notre Dame to help get Sam Hartman comfortable, help him get him ready, is there with Caleb Smith, so I'm giving it overall a C- grade. So those are the 4 receivers I got from this one, as well as the coordinators. Which of those coordinators would you be most interested in seeing go to Tuscaloosa? Any other receivers you want to hear my thoughts on? Any gripes or compliments you've got on the receivers I've graded, feel free to let me know in the comments. But for now, that is episode 59 of the From My Perspective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.